When a temporal agent is asked to travel back in time to prevent a serial bomber from killing 11,000 people, he discovers that his mission might not be as simple as he hoped. The movie begins with a mysteriously dressed man carrying 2 briefcases heading into an underground room at the subway. As soon as he arrives there, the man notices a bomb installed. He quickly gets to work and tries to defuse the bomb. However, before he can do that, an armed assailant comes up behind him and starts shooting. It's during this shootout that the man loses both of his briefcases. He manages to shoot at the assailant and tries to work on carrying the bomb with him when it explodes. Because he was in the direct line of fire, the explosion caused severe burns to his face, melting his skin off. Despite the serious nature of his injuries, the man tries to reach for his briefcase when the assailant pushes the case towards him. The two of them share a look, but the injured man is unable to see his face and quickly enters a code in the briefcase, which contains a time travel kit. Some time later, the man wakes up and finds himself alone in a hospital room, covered in bandages. Not long after, his bosses visit him and offer him a medal for his services. Before they leave, they tell him to rest until it's time for his new mission. When they leave, the man immediately gets to work and starts going through news clippings. It turns out that the man was hunting a criminal called the Fizzle Bomber, who was responsible for a series of bombings leading up to one in 1975 in New York that killed 11,000 people. The man stays in the hospital for several months until his face recovers enough for the doctor to remove the bandages covering him. He is told that although his face has been reconstructed, it no longer looks similar to the face he remembers. As the bandages come off, the man sees his new face for the first time and prepares himself for his new beginning. 7 years later, he makes a full recovery, and unlike what his bosses had told him, he is unable to let go of his failed mission. He decides to go back in time and work things around. A few days later, he is handed the same briefcase with the time travel kit inside. He is then made to vow not to interfere with the timeline of events, or he will be subjected to death by lethal injection. That night, the man travels back to November 9th, 1970, and starts working as a bartender. He checks his watch to look at the time, and as expected, a young man walks into the bar and orders a drink. Just then, a news reporter talks about the rise of the Fizzle Bomber and the panic that had begun to spread because of this threat. The bartender strikes up a conversation with the young man, and eventually the man reveals that he is the author behind the True Confessions, under the pen name of the Unmarried Mother. The bartender immediately recognizes the articles and tells him how much he likes his writing. After much probing by the bartender, the unmarried mother begins telling him about his life. He reveals that he was born as a girl named Jane and was left at the doorstep of an orphanage in Cleveland. Everyone around Jane knew that she was different from a young age when she managed to avoid getting sick. As she grew up, Jane found herself to be an outcast as she never got along with anyone around her. She found herself wondering why her parents had abandoned her when she saw other children with their parents. To distract herself from her loneliness, Jane started reading about space and began to fall in love with the undiscovered universe. Not only was she extremely smart, always staying on top of her studies, but she also was physically strong. She wanted her future children to never feel like they missed out on having both parents around, which is why she tried to be strong like a man and self-aware like a woman. This caused her to often get into fights and even damage property while trying to prove her strength. This resulted in her getting singled out and never getting adopted. Jane eventually accepted that she would never be a daughter or even a wife. However, her life started to turn around when a man named Robertson approached her and recruited her for Space Corps, a spaceflight organization, as a sexual partner for male astronauts during R&R. The women who had been recruited alongside her were mostly prostitutes who did not have any family besides themselves. They were put through rigorous training regimens to make sure that their bodies could withstand space travel. Although many girls were unable to go through with some of the tests, Jane enjoyed every single moment because she finally had a purpose in her life. They were shown realistic visuals of space travel while also getting tested for their endurance by running on a treadmill. As per usual, Jane would be the last woman standing, and just like what she had experienced as a young girl, Jane became an outcast among the other recruits. As their training came towards an end, Jane sat down for a polygraph where she was asked if she thinks about love. She confesses that she occasionally thinks about it and wonders why no one in her life has ever reciprocated her feelings. Later that day, Jane got into a fight with one of the recruits. She effortlessly took down the girl and gave her a good beating. The fight was broken and the two of them were sent to the doctor's office. While Jane waited for her report, the doctor informed Robertson that he has found something strange about her. When Robertson sees her report, he asks the doctor to keep his findings a secret and that he will handle Jane. After this, Jane is told to pack her things without an explanation. She ends up assuming that she is being let go due to her fight. Before she leaves, Robertson assures her that he will do everything in his power to make sure that Jane gets recruited back into the program. Once again lost, Jane started working as a housekeeper for a family and helped them with chores around the house. This is when she discovered a magazine with confession stories and started reading them religiously. Jane managed to establish a routine and piece her life together again as she worked in the morning and attended classes for etiquette during the night. One rainy night, Jane ran into a man after leaving her class. She asks the man what he's doing and he replies that he is waiting for someone. Without looking up, Jane says, "Good things come to those who wait." To her surprise, the man finishes the second half of the quote. This marks the beginning of her whirlwind romance with the man, and Jane falls in love for the first time in her life. In the present time, the author tells the bartender that she thought the man was perfect since he was rich enough to take care of her, although he acknowledges that their relationship was only a fling for the man. Jane's relationship with the man progressed, and one night while out on a date, the man told her to wait for him. She waited the entire night for him to return, but he never did. Determined to not let it get her down again, Jane starts working towards getting into Space Corps. One day she gets approached by Robertson again, who reveals that she had been recruited for a top-secret government project who were using Space Corps to hire highly intelligent and capable agents. Although he did not offer any explanations, Jane was excited to get started. Much to her disappointment, Jane discovered that she was pregnant, due to which she was no longer eligible for the project. Devastated, Jane found herself among a group of pregnant women, but she was determined to not let her child grow up unloved. Soon, it was time for her to give birth, and she was rushed to the hospital where an emergency C-section was performed. When she woke up from the surgery, the doctor informed Jane that they had discovered something strange about her body and asked her if she was ever given a proper medical checkup. Confused, Jane confirms that she had one at Space Corps and everything was fine. To her shock, the doctor tells her that she has both male and female sets of organs inside her body. Due to her traumatic birth, they had to perform a hysterectomy and take out her reproductive organs. Although this discovery came as a shock to Jane, she focused on taking care of her daughter. However, while recovering at the hospital, Jane's daughter got kidnapped and was never found again. To make matters worse, she had to undergo several surgeries to transition into a male. She struggled with accepting her new reality, and months later, after fully transitioning, Jane tried to rebuild her life. Once again, she showed up at Space Corps, but was rejected due to her medical records. This is when she decided to move to New York, and Confessions of an Unmarried Mother was born. Back in the bar, the bartender asked Jane if she would kill the man who had left her pregnant and alone. She immediately says yes, and the bartender tells her that he knows where the man is. However, she does not believe him, but when he takes the name of her caretaker at the orphanage and reveals that he knows the name that Jane goes by now, she starts to believe him. He goes on to tell her that he works closely with Robertson and is part of his secret government project. The bartender then offers to help Jane, who is now known as John, locate the man and takes him to the bar's basement. When John notices the bartender locking up the basement, he begins to get suspicious, but still goes along with the plan. The bartender brings out the same case that had been handed to him by the agents, and he teleports an unsuspecting John to 1963 Cleveland. He offers John some money and the location of the man, claiming that he needs to quickly kill the man because there's a chance that he could have been the Fizzle Bomber. John arrives at the location where he bumps into a girl, and when he turns around, he finds that the girl is Jane and that he was the man who had left her. Meanwhile, the bartender, who was an undercover time travel agent all along, goes underground and finds the bomber setting up a bomb. The two of them start shooting at each other, and eventually the bomber manages to corner him and knock him out. Sometime later, he regains consciousness when he hears gunshots in the distance. At that moment, he walks in on his past self burning his face off. He helps his past self by pushing the briefcase towards him and leaving. He then makes another time jump and meets with Robertson. He hands the agent a piece of the bomb he had picked up. Robertson realizes that he has made an illegal jump and warns him of the consequences. After this, he picks up Jane's baby from the hospital and drops her off at the orphanage. Once again, he jumps back in time to see Jane and John on a date. When John spots him, he rushes to meet him but is angry at being deceived. The bartender assures him that this is how everything was supposed to happen, and the two of them jump back to their present time. While John is put to sleep to recover from the jump, the bartender makes his final jump to 1975 New York, where he is planning on spending his retirement. Robertson had told him that his time travel kit would decommission after this jump, but to his surprise, he finds that it has one last jump left. He realizes that Robertson was sending him signs to continue searching for the Fizzle Bomber. One morning, the bartender walks into an antique store and buys a typewriter. He starts writing, and at this moment, he finally understands that he, John, and Jane are the same person. He starts searching for other clues that had been left by Robertson. He decides to visit a laundromat that had been highlighted by the agent. When he arrives there, he finds that an older version of him is the Fizzle Bomber. His older version tells him that no matter what he does at this moment, it is inevitable for him to become the bomber. The bartender shoots his older version, yet the cycle does not break and continues as a baby Jane grows up to live her life. She then becomes John, who later on becomes a time travel agent, and just like his older version had predicted, he became the Fizzle Bomber in 1975. Thanks for watching, and remember to subscribe to our channel if you enjoyed the content, like and share in the comments any movies you would like us to recap.